All right, welcome back to Hanging Out Podcast. I always forget the intro to this. This is the only podcast on the internet where we talk art and business at the same time, featuring us. I'm joined by Bruce Benezi, Brett Nazy. I'm Alan Morris. I've just come back from a convention, so I'm everywhere. And today we're hanging out with Doug Hobbs. Do you like to be called Dougie, or is it Doug?
So I love being called Dougie, but it looks really weird when you put it on books and online.
Yeah.
So I just say Doug. But everybody who knows me everybody calls me Dougie.
Okay. Yeah. How's it
I
going?
was wondering if that was a branding thing, since you're like, more on the dark art side of things.
Well, the thing about it is, Doug sounds so formal. It's like my dad's going to Doug listens and my dad's going to yell at me. Doug is like everybody just like in my office. But I like Dougie better. And even if it's dark, since I do dark art, it's still, Dougie's just got it. It's different. And I like being slightly different.
Sure.
Yeah, I always felt that way. Alan Morris is a very, I don't know, non-fantasy artist name, because you've got like your Dan Dos Santos and your Donatos and your Lockwoods, and then there's Alan Morris. And I always felt a little bashful about it.
Granted, I don't know if you want us going into this.
Yeah, I've got my
not your
father's
name.
My first name is actually Randy. And I always said when I hit middle age, I'd change from using Alan to Randy Morris, but now it's on everything, so keeping it.
Well, that, and you're going to get everybody going, oh, there's that Randy guy over there.
Yeah.
Well, it's become a competition for me now, because, as I've said before on the show, I'm competing for the first page of Google with a real estate company named Alan Morris.
Oh,
They know who I am, and I'm catching up with them.
Nice.
So, yeah. I just got back from a convention. It was the worst convention I've ever done.
Wow.
Do you want me to talk about it? I want to talk about it. So.
Yeah.
Sure. Talk about it.
I made $2,000, which is, if I'm stretching things, that's my floor, right? And so I didn't lose money. Thankfully, I can still keep saying I've never lost money at a show. But when you factor in, food and travel, it gets a little.
So it's 2K in sales, right? Not profit, just sales.
Yeah, 2K sales. Yeah, not profit.
Oh.
It was no profit. Actually, if I'm being honest, I lost maybe $100, but
yeah.
That's Fan Expo, so that would be 4 days.
3 days. This was New Orleans Fan Expo. I was trying it out for the first time because I'm trying to drive to more shows, and it was a multitude of factors. We had some bad weather down here. Somebody took a wrong turn in New Orleans, and there's just a couple factors going against it.
Aside from Denver, Fan Expo doesn't necessarily have the best reputation in terms of how they run the shows either. And I don't know if this was one of the shows that they picked up when they bought Wizard World, but Wizard World also didn't have the best reputation when it came to running shows and building up shows.
I felt like this show was well run. I'd done enough research to know that the Wizard World New Orleans, I think more because of the area and maybe the time of year, it was one that was kind of loved by locals, people that would come in from the South just to be there. That said, when you've got the cast of Back to the Future charging $1,000 for signatures, nobody's coming to your booth to fall in love with art.
That is the tough part with Comic-Cons, because you're competing against what the fans want. And they really do want signatures more than anything else, because they can get art online and stuff like that. They can't get the signatures at the shows unless you go to shows.
Except at the shows, yeah.
So, it was, that's basically it. We were just talking before the show, and I think you would, or at least when you were doing conventions, would agree that when people come up to my booth, much like yours, who you're not especially associated with like a brand, right? Other than your own. So it requires them to fall in love in the moment, right?
Yep.
They don't come with that preconceived.
It's also percentages. So I'm very analytical about my entire business and stuff like that. But think of this way. If you're doing a Comic-Con, I would say, so there's on a 20,000 person Comic-Con, I would make probably around $4,000. And so, of 20,000 people, I would say maybe 1,000 to 2,000 people like my stuff. Of those 1,000 to 2,000 people, maybe 10%. So, at like a Comic Con, I would say maybe 1 to 2% would actually buy from me. So, that I always factor in so that I know that, okay, if I'm doing a 10,000 person show, I'm going to be around $52,000. If I'm doing a 20,000 person show, around $3,000 or $4,000. And then like the 80,000 people would be around $4,000 or $5,000.
That's gonna be net profit, right?
No, that's gross.
Gross. Okay. Oh,
Because I also
what,
don't do detail work. So,
where do you get the numbers for how many people are attending the con? Because those things get
oh,
a little
yeah.
iffy.
Okay. So, whenever I used to do like Comic Cons, or actually, whenever I do new shows, there's two things I always do. First thing I do is I do a Google search for numbers. But more importantly than the Google search for numbers, I find YouTube videos about the show.
Yeah, the
Because
walk around videos, I love
the
those.
walk around videos, I love those because you can see, get a feel of how many people are really there because most of those people are going to do them on a Saturday. So you can see how crowded the aisles are on
Right.
that type of show. That is the greatest piece of information I get. And then also when I'm watching when I watch the videos for the shows. So you know how people always say, okay, well, there's a lot of people there. You've had shows like this. There's a lot of people, but you don't see anybody buying or you're not making a lot of sales. So when I watch the videos, I actually watch also how many people have bags in their hands.
Yeah.
If they have bags in their hands that they're buying, if they don't, they're just using the show as entertainment, which means they're doing signatures and all the other stuff.
That's where I messed up. I did the walk around video. Everything looked great. It was so much more crowded than I actually even thought it would be. But everyone was going somewhere. Nobody was
Yep.
stopping to look. Nobody was buying. And so from now on, I'm taking your advice on that one. I'm looking for
You
bags.
got to look at bags in the hands. The other thing that's why always people are like, well, you're like, they say you're going to be near bathrooms. And they always go, oh, the bathrooms are the greatest places, to be because everybody has to go to the bathroom. Problem about it is think about when you go to the bathroom. You go to the bathroom. When you come out, the first thing you want to do is not shop. First thing you want to do is get back to your group of friends that you had before you went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So all it is a pass through where they see you and then just keep walking by.
Yeah. Yeah, I always feel that way about the first booth when you walk in the door too.
Yeah, you
I
don't
hate
want to be
being
the
the first
first
booth
They
when
one.
they're
sell
the
it
door.
as a premium spot, but
Mhm.
nobody. I always
Nope.
feel like it's the one you walk by.
You have a certain momentum. You get in, you're like, okay, acclimating to the room now, acclimating. It's like a few booths down the row where you're like, oh, okay, now let's actually start looking with the mind rather than just the eyes.
Mhm.
Yeah. My favorite spot is always to be in the middle of the show because the middle of the show is where most people tend to hang out at. Or if you're facing the food tables. Those two areas are usually pretty good.
Yeah, that's why I don't give up my space at Planet Comic Con because I have a booth right there between the food tables and the main stage area, and I don't have that good of a spot at any other show. It just I guess that's why other people come to that show. I always talk it up, and then other people come to the show and they're like, "I didn't make any money."
Well, and it's
So,
a big aircraft hangar of a show, so there's
yes.
bound to be some big dead spots in there.
Oh, when I did that Planet Comic Con, when they first had Spectrum was
Yep,
at Planet
yep.
Comic, I did horrible. That was like an awful show because even though I had all the art, I had my Shadow Myth decks which have game cards in them. So what they did is they put me in the back corner by the game people. I'm like,
Oh no.
okay, and nobody knew I was there. I'm like, all right, this is just not good.
Yeah, there's like certain placements.
Location.
Yeah.
It really does. It is. I've seen differences between. I did one show, like an oddity show, but I've seen differences like between like $6,000 to $8,000 being in one corner facing the wall versus being out towards the middle. Just location is unfortunately you can't pick your locations, so it's a
And
gamble.
Speaking of that, Gen Con usually puts new exhibitors in like an
The entrepreneur.
entrepreneur's avenue or something that's like back in a corner somewhere.
Hmm.
I assume you went through that process. How was that, Dougie?
Oh, no, I never went through that process.
Really? How
Yep.
do you avoid that process?
So this is the way I did it. Okay, so this is the way I did it. So I got juried into the art show, and I was in
Mhm.
a nice location in the art show.
Yeah.
And that year, what I said was like, you know what? I went and applied, but my work is a 50-50 whether jurors like it because I don't do the traditional type of work.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, but it was a good year. So I'm like, back then it was good. It's not so much now. We can actually talk about that. But what I did was I went and applied. And when I applied, I said, hey, guess what? I'm in the art show, but I have cards for D&D and a bunch of other stuff. And they go, I'd like a 10 by 10 booth. Well, we can't give you a corner booth, but we'll give you a 10 by 10 booth anyway. And then they gave me a 10 by 10 booth by the outside the art show. And that turned, so you can't fix your location. That turned into a hit and miss every time. So I never got back that artist alley. I was kind of in different
Mhm.
locations. But like this year was just awful. My profit margin, well, not last year, but the year before, my profit margin was something like $1,200 for the 4 days after all my expenses, even though I
Wow.
did well. Well, the problem about it is that I did some around a little over $7,000, but a corner booth is like $3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very
Now you've got
expensive.
the hotel for 5 days. You've
Yeah.
got the other stuff, and I
It's a
was in
pricey show.
none of the main throughways, so I was actually in like an inset from the main throughway, and there was a bunch of people going like, "I didn't even know you were here." So it was a disaster show for me. I'm like, oh, this is not good. So even though it looks like I made money, I really
Sure.
didn't make that much by the time I got done with expenses.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I because I didn't jury in last year. I was determined to do the booth this year, but then I saw that price tag and I was like, oh, maybe I'll try the art show again. The
See if they
same thing.
still like me over there.
The same thing happened with C2E2, which I've talked to a lot of people about. It's still touch and go on whether I'm actually going to go, but it's like $3,000 for a corner booth,
Yeah.
which doesn't seem C2E2 is not Gen Con,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so
I think PAX Unplugged, I was trying to get into there for a while too. I think it's around $3,000 for the booth there also. And they're really great shows. And you can really make a lot of money if you have the product that they want.
yeah.
Kind of like Comic Cons where I was talking about there's a 1% X% chance.
Mhm.
If
Right.
you do traditional art or you're known in the magic community and all the other stuff, you can do extremely well because people do come and spend money. But you have to match that type of niche
Right.
of product you create.
Yeah, and I feel like just like you're saying for Gen Con, you gotta, placement, but also controlling your space. One of my biggest issues at this recent show, oh, did we lose Dougie? No, he's back.
Nope.
I talked to people that were making money, and it turned out the trick to making money at Fan Expo New Orleans was to buy 2 or 3 booth spots and have a massive booth.
And that's the way of, especially now with all the AI going to some of these shows and everything like that. They're just creating these massive towers, and there's companies that are
Right. Yeah.
licensing out the people. So you get these huge, massive plastic towers of art. It really is just taking over everything, and they're just going online, grabbing the stuff or generating AI art, and then just throwing it on there.
Yeah,
And honestly, the customers love that stuff, and they
I
will.
saw
Yeah, go ahead.
AI art on blankets at Walmart yesterday. I never thought I'd see it at Walmart, but yeah.
Well, Walmart already had some kind of like splashy, rendery type, stuff. The equivalent of like it was, the equivalent of the stuff that you'd see on vans back in the day. That kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
let's pull out an airbrush and render the shit out of something like
Mhm.
that sort of thing. Like was possible to get at Walmart even before all this. So I'm not too surprised about that.
I guess my thought process there was that Walmart has such. I mean, it doesn't like shelf space is always limited, even at a giant like Walmart, and so I figured the AI stuff wouldn't stand out enough for it to make shelf space, but I guess it did.
Well, it depends. If it depends how much of profit margin they're making off of it. I mean, you think of it this way: they're a business. So if they've got this X product with a huge profit margin where
Mhm.
they're making a bunch of money off of it versus something else that, and they're not making the money, they're going to grab the thing that has the most profit margin. So,
True. Yeah. As long as it's coming off the shelf, right?
yep, the goal is as long as it moves off the shelf and they can make a bunch of money at it, of course they're going to do it. They're a
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. You said you didn't do conventions anymore. Why
No,
not?
I do oddity and curiosity shows. So the way it worked was that hands down, I always tell people this, hands down, conventions. So I treat everything based on ROI, return on investment.
Yeah.
Hands down, conventions are the biggest return on investment you will ever have for the most part. Because, but the thing about it is that you can't think of conventions mainly as places where you make money. So conventions, I think of conventions as marketing spaces. So I can pay money for advertising. My convention fee is my advertising cost
Hmm.
because nobody in the world is ever going to know me except for a handful of people that see my work unless something goes viral. Nobody's ever going to know me at all. But if I go to a convention, they're going to meet me and people buy you as much as they buy their product. So they're going to say, oh,
Mhm.
you're there. They're going to sign up for a mailing list. You're going to send them emails on the mailing list, which all mailing lists are is reminders that, hey, I still exist. Would you like
Yeah.
to buy something from me? Why, yes, I would, because I remembered you. So I went from Comic Cons, which I was doing about 3,000 to 4,000, about say 4,000 for the really big shows, off and on. Like I'd maybe do like 8 or 10,000 at like MomoCons and a couple other ones, which were pretty good. So I went from
Uh-oh. Microphone cutting
Uh,
out.
I think Dougie. Yeah. I guess you cut out for a second there.
okay. So where would I go next? The next spot I went from those is I went to tattoo shows. Tattoo shows were really good and they bought a lot of my originals. But what I found was that my sales went down at tattoo shows because most of the artists who were at the tattoo shows had all the originals they wanted. So I wasn't selling any many originals. And from that tattoo shows, I moved into oddity and curiosity shows. At an oddity and curiosity show, I would say about 70% of even though there's only 10,000 people, 70% wanted my stuff.
Oh
So
wow.
as opposed to 50,000 people were 1% would get, so that's 5,000 people versus a 10,000 or 15,000 person show at 70% wanted my stuff. That's a larger number of people that want my stuff. So yeah, nowadays I mainly do oddity and curiosity shows. And I'm thinking about I may end up adding a couple more of the other shows because nothing lasts forever, which
Right.
means I
Sure.
like to make sure I spread around, to grab MomoCon some of the other shows.
Yeah. So you've just basically further centered in on your niche there
Yes.
with the oddity shows. That's
But it
interesting.
sounds like the oddity shows have gotten a little bit more competitive recently. I heard people talking about their process of basically approving you for all shows at once at one point in the year, and so that can be a little bit of a rough situation.
Well, it's always been like that. And I will hands down say the oddity and curiosity shows, like with Michelle, I can never remember Michelle. I can hands down say they are probably the best show producers ever. I mean, we get show notifications a month before the show starts, with all the load-in instructions, everything like that. My favorite part is maybe there's construction the day before the show, or she goes, oh, and she'll send us updates. Here's the new direction you want to go, or here's a new address to make sure you get the loading dock properly. Um,
That's great.
but yes, it's turned into very competitive. Nowadays, when I applied years ago, I applied like 6 years ago, and you know, it was a little hard to get into, but I still was able to get into it. Nowadays, from what we've heard, was there's typically about 4,000 entries in October on Halloween, and they have to. And now the shows aren't big; they're not like these 500 booth shows. They're usually 180, maybe 200 booths at the time. And so that's no, you don't have that many openings, and you got 4,000 people applying. And
Right.
here's the biggest important part about the oddity show, which I totally actually agree with. It's along the lines of when you're doing these shows, It's got to be your identity. And so all the people that's pretty much in the shows, this is our identity. We do dark art. We do
Hmm.
dark, we do skeletons, we do bone, we do whatever. But this is, it's not like, because I've come across a couple others, well, I can do that. It's like, well, it's like working with an art director. Well, yeah, you can do that. However, it's not your identity.
Right.
And they really want your identity because the customers who come there are like me. They're exactly like us.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Which
the old. What's that?
yeah,
It's the old like the definition of good
yeah.
salesmanship is people like me like things like this.
And that's exactly what we have at these oddity and curiosity shows.
Yeah, I've found that more and more. I had somebody actually I had somebody ask me earlier today, how did they get away from the equating, like when they're working on a new piece, how do they get away from the money side, like focusing on whether this is going to sell or not? It's like, no, it's the wrong way to think about it. Think about things that will sell well, because I think you'll find that they're going to be the most enjoyable for you. So it's a way to game your mind, right? Because you think everybody likes it, but it's really just you and people like you.
Yeah. And you're painting for yourself.
Yeah.
So one of the tricks I always do when I do a painting is, and I've got one exactly like this, and it's gonna, my latest painting is gonna go back on the easel. Because one of the things I do when I get done with a painting, I put it in my studio, and in the morning I get up, go to the shower, I want to go look at it. At night, I want to go look at it. Oh, that's cool. I'm in my do day job. I go look at it. If I
Hmm.
don't want to keep looking at the painting, it's not quite right. There's something I'm missing. And I think
Hmm.
about what I'm missing, I put it in the easel and then fix it up until it gets to a point where like, oh yeah, this is what I want to say and this is what I want to paint.
Huh.
And then I've got a collector base who will pay for it.
So you're doing basically a responsive approach
Yeah,
to your work there. Yeah, I had a teacher in college. That was his entire approach to every painting was pure responsiveness.
yeah.
Um, very modern uh, in terms of art. But your work as a type of style, just like you said, not a detail or a these days you're shifting more to narrative, right? But
I So my painting is a voyeur style. So like I said, we were talking earlier. So like I said, I have three basic rules, and everything bases on these rules for my entire art business. The first rule is I try. The first rule is that you've got to be so good you can't be ignored, which means you have to have the skill to do it. That
mm,
people walk by and go, "Oh, this is amazing." It doesn't mean you have to have detail. It just means you have to have something about it, whether the way you use colors, the way you use your brush strokes, how realistic you can do, it doesn't matter what it is. But there's something about it that stands out and people go, that's cool. And they want to look at it. Alan Panicle is very good at that. He's got a really nice color palette that just makes his work stand out really well.
mm,
Um, the second thing I always say is you've got to do familiar, but your own twist to it. So I do dark art, but my own twist to it is that I it's the way I use my paper towels and palette knives in the painting. It's my story that I put. Every painting has a personal story, like a uplifting moral story that's part dark, part light. That's my little own twist to it. And then the third rule I always say is you got to make a connection. And we were talking about this earlier. Is if you're This is why people love fan art. They're watching the movies. They're identifying with a particular character. I'm Iron Man. I'm Sailor Moon. I'm whatever. Well, they're going to go and buy that character because that's them. They've got
right,
that connection with it. For me, at a show, they'll read a story and they'll go, so my stories are more like tarot cards and paintings like tarot cards. So they'll go to a show, they'll find through one, read one, like, oh crap, this is me, exactly what I'm going through. So any given
right.
show, I will have 1 to 3 people tear up or cry. I've had one show I had 5 people cry, 4 people teared up, and 3 guys needed hugs. That's what I want to do.
That's what you want. Yeah, it's there. Over whenever I started doing this series of statues, um, I wasn't doing too poorly at conventions, but I wasn't doing great, right? And when I started doing these, people kept coming back over and over, or stopping dead in their tracks and saying, "Well, this is either me or this is really touching me," and
That's
it
your connection. You
it's
got to
like,
have that
wow,
connection.
yeah. And so again, I kept doing it, and it's been wildly successful. I,
Isn't it?
but
You can build a
but
brand off of that.
and you can break that connection too. I had to learn the hard way to stop talking, because people will come up and they'll say, oh wow, this painting's perfect. This is so good. And then you tell them when you tell them what the painting means, it kind of takes away their fantasy, right?
It does. I had this guy. He was a customer. He bought two of my paintings. Big guy. He had tattoo shows, and I'm like, and this is like, no, I do not want to hear it. Do not. You talk too much. Stop it.
Yeah,
I don't want to hear it. So
He's
I'm like,
been
okay,
through it
like
before.
I want my own story.
right.
I'm going to block this out in the back. I'm like, good for you.
Yeah, I've watched the light leave people's eyes when I tell them what my thought process is for the painting.
My favorite is that a lot of times at shows, I feel like I'm like the mental therapist bartender at a show.
Hmm.
I mean, people will start reading the story. They're like, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm going through. Sometimes they'll tell me about their therapy sessions, or they'll say, oh, you know what, I've got this type of mental illness I'm going with. I've been talking to my therapist, and I'm sitting there going like, I gotta get back to some other customers. I'm sorry, but yes, if you wait here, I'll listen to some more.
Our session is up, but
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be here next time. See
My
me in
wife's
a
like, you
year
got
for your
to keep
next
pushing.
session.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's that we always talk about at shows. There's those people that subconsciously or consciously, I don't know, but they've figured out that you're a captive audience because you can't leave your booth, and
Right.
probably no one else in their life is that for them, right?
Yeah.
Where it's the equivalent of like handing a waitress your phone number. It's like, oh, she's really nice to me. It's like, no, I'm just working.
I know. There's invariably it always happens when they find out that I've got my cards for D&D and a bunch of other stuff. Invariably, it always happens that there usually will be somewhere between 12 to 14 or so. Usually it's a boy, and it's usually a thin little boy sitting there talking, and he's telling me about every one of his D&D campaigns. And while I'm talking to other
Oh
people,
yeah,
when I'm talking to other people, he'll like stop talking to me, and then when I'm done talking to them, he'll continue back, and he'll kind of
Yeah.
I really have to go. I'm really sorry. I'd love to talk to you some more, but if you want to come back at the end of the show, I would definitely talk up while I'm.
yeah,
But right now, I got to take care of these other people. But it's always some young boy around 12 or so.
yeah. That's a good way to do it. Maybe I'm ruder.
That's a kind way of
Well, I
doing
do
it.
that because, well, you know when people ask you about your portfolio, can you look at my stuff? I will always look at portfolios too, but I
Sure.
always tell
Sure.
them,
Don't do that.
if you'd like to come back at the end of the show when I'm less busy, please, absolutely, I'd love it. And
Mm.
there was one girl, and she was in she was in high school, or maybe when I first saw her junior high school. But every year she would she would show me her portfolio. She came to at the end of the day, showed me her portfolio. I would explain, this is great. You maybe think about this, this, and this. The next year I saw her at the show. Well, I did this. I worked on this. Okay, now what? And so she did that for like 5 years. She ended up going to art school. I introduced her to my buddy Chuck Grieve, who helped her figure out what type of things she wants to do after school and everything like that.
Yeah,
She was doing great.
Well, paying it forward with young artists is one thing. I don't know that I'd have necessarily as much patience for the guy who wants to tell you about every single D&D campaign they've ever done, though.
Do you do the I thankfully have my assistant, my wife, and so I do the bathroom trick where they're sitting there talking your ear off, and I go, okay, I've got to run real fast. You can do whatever with my wife, and then Sarah knows to come up and say, well, what piece were you interested in?
Yeah, yep.
No,
Okay, it's a sale
And then,
now
then,
or head
then
off.
I'll make a lap around the convention, you know.
Now I've only used the booth, but I will turn away from people.
Or like start looking for things, you know.
Right.
My table 90% of the time, it's pretty rare. Even when I was Comic Con, most of the time my table usually has about at least one level of people, so I have like 5 or 10 people, but a lot of times it really is about 2 level deep sometimes. And I just turn away and talk to some of the other customers, stuff like that.
Yeah, not to make it sound like every or even those customers are in the wrong. I mean, I actually would talk to them most of the time. It's just whenever you see money walking by, you know,
Right.
you're there to make money, right?
It's business time.
Just say, excuse me, I've got to deal with this other, and I've never come across a problem. They've pretty much said, okay. And they kind of wander off.
I started I had a lot of time at this last convention, so I've started categorizing making names for the types of customers, just to kill time. And do you ever get there's two customers you can catch in your Pokeball. One's called a lurker. I love these. You'll see them come by like 2-3 times, and they finally come up and buy something without ever
Mhm.
talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the quiet ones, or the silent ones, I'll call them.
Yep.
And you're selling, and you're like, hey, how's it going? How you doing? And they're like, I'm good.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
And
They're
you
very
can't
quiet.
understand them, and like they'll just walk by, or you'll mishear them and say something and then walk by. But yeah.
Got to be
Anyway,
gentle with them.
I did the Donato thing in my head, where I'm always going as a fan first, so I try and keep that in my mind too. You know. But yeah. What else about the oddities thing? Like, are they?
So
I got a question actually about that.
go for it.
You had a lot of experience at conventions and building up your space at conventions. When you go to the oddities market, do you find that your setup is leagues ahead of everyone, or
No,
no?
not even
Okay.
close. And I also don't make near as much as a lot of these guys.
Oh, really?
So the reality is that some of these guys they make ridiculous amounts of money, and I do really well, but not even close to a lot of these guys, even artists. So that's why I always say I'm a mid-level artist.
Hmm.
Some of these guys will make 20, 30, 40,000 for the weekend. So for 2 days. Um, it's not that my booth is nicer, but in reality,
Yeah.
it's not like you have artist alley tables. You do have tables and stuff like that, and those are pretty nice. But it's not. You got 150 tables, so it's not like there's major differences between everybody.
Right.
What it really comes down to, is the price margins, and if you're offering something, but that people won't buy. But there's people there easily will spend $2, $5, $10,000 without a problem. And so what I found was that the amount they're willing to spend is much higher than what you
Hmm.
would normally see. They are looking for some of the deals, where you can get, things, a lot of the sales items for like $200 or $300 items, those sell really quick. So like when I sell my 140, like in the beginning, we were talking about last year online, in the beginning of the year, my canvas, 18 by 24 canvas prints are $140. I would sell somewhere between 20 to 25 of those at a show at the beginning of the
Hmm.
year. Or my 9 by 12s, which were um, 62 for 100, and I would sell like 40 of those.
Mm-hmm.
And because they will spend the money. Of my 170 oil paintings, I have 5 left, and the only reason I have those 5 is because I painted them within the last month. I haven't brought them to a show, and that's the only reason I haven't sold them. So they will come in there and they'll spend $1,000. Well, on mine they'll spend $1,000 because I offer payment plans, but they spend the money. But you do have to shift out how you're doing the spending. So we were talking about how the beginning of the year, like Bruce, you were talking about your shows were going gangbusters and everything like that, and all of a sudden the whole market dropped out,
Right.
which means, okay, beginning of the year, yeah, my $100 to $1,000 items were going like crazy. Halfway during the year, crap. Talking to a bunch of people, they weren't buying the $150 items. They were buying anything less than 100. So I reshifted all of my product lines to be less than $100. And the people who were selling multiple copies of, multiple versions where you get like 5 or 6 prints were making a killing because people wanted the quantity because they were making a shorter amount of money. So the booths are comparable, but everything really comes down to is what the customer actually really wants to buy.
Hmm.
And for oddity shows, taxidermy is still king more than anything else. People love their skulls and people love their taxidermied animals.
So those are the big sellers that you were talking
Yeah,
about at that particular
yeah.
show. It's
Well,
the
like
taxidermy.
they'll have like your giraffe heads and
Sure,
rhino,
sure.
horn, a bunch of other stuff.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
wow.
So basically, people go there looking to get the kind of stuff that you'd imagine sort of sitting around a sorcerer's lair.
You'll see that on the YouTube you'll see on um, Instagram. So out he does like the reels. You'll see
Mhm.
what people are carrying out. I was like flipping through the reels today. Somebody had a full blown antelope, the whole body, and just carrying that out of the show.
Yeah, when you get to decorate, like people that want to decorate their house a specific way, it's almost like the vault opens, right? I'm sure
Yeah,
you're probably seeing very similar to what I'm seeing is that whenever I started offering large, high-priced versions of my paintings, they started selling like hotcakes because
yeah,
then I feel like you were tapping into no one's going to buy $1,000 picture. Well, somebody will, but most people aren't going to buy $1,000 picture of Spider-Man to hang in their living room, right?
right.
But they might buy something from you or I, or another fine artist. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't mean to leave Bruce out of it, but like you I feel like my convention stuff. I can't even sell my book covers at conventions, but you're pretty set in the magic market now.
Well,
Um,
it depends on, again, which demographic you're hitting, right? Like if you're at a show for people who are all about the Spider-Man or whatever,
Yeah,
like, yeah, someone out there probably is, but that's not most people, right? And
right.
so if you're thinking about, okay, like the various demographics out there and what they have in mind for their house and how they want to decorate it and, what they're willing to, in terms of like uh, uh, what I do and who I'm appealing to, as a lands artist for Magic, I'm actually somewhat lucky in that a land card, a landscape, is something that can potentially fly in a mixed area, right? Where you're gonna have your mother-in-law or whatever come over, and she's like, "Oh, very beautiful plain landscape or
Mm.
mountainscape that you've got there. Reminds me of Bob Ross, but it's actually, a mountain card, a plain card, or whatever for Magic, right? Whereas if it was, a couple of planeswalkers tussling it out, throwing a bunch of glowy magic around, something like that, or maybe some gross looking Phyrexians doing some stuff like that's not going to work so well for most people's living room wall.
yeah.
Yeah.
Painted
So
well, man.
it kind of depends on what you're actually selling to people and how wide that demographic is that's going to hang it up on their wall, because someone will, but that might not be enough of those someones to make for a sustainable living, right?
Well, another different thing about you is that you are, when you're behind the Cascades, you're flying to a
I'm
majority of your
flying to
shows.
almost
So
all my shows, yes.
it becomes like you can't bring the 10, 20 canvases, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
have a
I haven't
minivan.
figured out that one.
I, I might. I got to figure that out for March. I got two conventions in a row. I'm gonna have to ship to one of them, and I'm not looking forward to. What do you do, Dougie? How do you bring if you've
I
got,
drive.
let's say, huh?
I drive.
Well, I do
Um,
too, but I don't think I can fit it all.
Yeah, you're in
Even
oh, I do. I have a
North
minivan.
Carolina or something like
Yeah,
that, Dougie?
I'm in North Carolina. So my farthest I drive out to is Denver, Colorado, which is 24 hours.
Mhm.
But yeah, I have a full minivan. It fills in my entire booth. Plus, my all my prints have backing boards onto it, so I have bins. But yeah, I fill up my minivan like fully. My
Yeah,
we
basically the same
Santa.
thing that you're doing, Alan.
Well, I bought a truck recently, and I packed it full for this show just to see how much I could fit. And I
Hmm.
know that I can fit roughly 25K worth of merchandise in my vehicle. Uh, and that's still, I don't know. I guess it makes me nervous because one of the shows of the two I'm driving to within 3 days of each other is a bigger show. So
So you figure 25K bare minimum. You're probably looking at about. I usually predict around 50% of my inventory on an average show. I predict around 50 to
mm,
70% of my inventory goes. So yeah, I usually bring about 20 to 30K. On a good show, I lose about most of it. So
mm,
yeah, that's about right. It's the one things you can do, which some of my friends do, is what you do is you bring part of the thing and you ship part of it, either a
I
shipping
think
container or
that's
something like that. And then what you do is you store it in a storage unit at the
mm.
other place, fly home, and then grab more stuff or something like that. Because they use one
Well.
of the storage units.
I know FedEx will hold my whatever I ship there for 7 days, which is sounds like a long window. It's really not, right? Because I don't know exactly when it'll arrive. But
Right.
that's what I might do. The storage unit. How much is storage unit? It's like $100 a month. Man, that's a lot of money to.
Yeah, it depends how many shows you got in that area. I know one of the things I'm looking at is there you can get. I think I was talking to a manufacturer. It takes about it's like $2,000 for a container bin and actually have that shipped to the
Oh,
convention center,
yeah,
where
The
they get the bin, they
alternative,
drop it
yeah.
off your house, you load the container bin, and then put it in there. But if
and
you
then you have
think
to
about
pay the portage fee for whatever convention you're at.
it, that would not be $2,000 plus a little bit. But if you look at it, if you've got say tour, like a big show there, you're going to make like $8,000 or $9,000.
Mhm.
And that if you didn't do that, you either have to do the drive or not go to the show. You're going to about maybe a $6,000 profit off that. It may be worth it for that weekend. One of the
Yeah.
rules I always have whenever I'm doing a show and all the other stuff is I factor in, is it worth it for me to leave the house this weekend, leave my wife, and
Right.
for me, I have to have a profit of around $3,000 to decide to leave for the weekend. And
Good
that's
to have that
Yeah.
everybody has
metric
different
in
numbers.
mind.
Hmm?
It's good to have that metric in mind.
It is.
This off the same post that we were talking on Facebook, Dougie. I think I was talking to Kafir again, and he was talking about, we were kind of going back and forth about like, okay, how much am I making per hour, and is it worth, leaving home and so on. I was telling him, well, look, I've got my kind of way of thinking about it, and I don't necessarily count all of my travel time as work time because
Right.
some of that, for me personally, not for everyone generally, ends up being a nice kind of downtime between home life and con life.
Mm.
And either one is technically a little bit more social time than I really want. So it's like I actually get to have a little meditative time on the plane between my lives. But that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone. And he was saying that he would count, anything when you're away from your family should count. I'm like, well, for you it might, but for
Yeah,
me
it really is
it
different for
doesn't.
everybody. But the reason why I use that number is very simple. I have a lot of friends who say, I want to do, so I do about 20 shows a year, but I have the day job also.
Hmm.
So I have my wife, my dog, my day job, and the thing. So I want to balance it all. But I've seen too many people where they do like 40 to 45 shows a year. And I'm like, well, okay, is it really, you're, you're,
Right, at
you're
that
away
point
from
the
home.
show is your life.
Yeah, the show is your life, but what you're doing is you're paying for the relationship. You're paying for
Yeah.
this is the amount of time you're away from home is taken away from your wife, your family, and stuff like that. Is it worth the money? And that show is only like $1,000, $2,000. Is it worth $2,000 to be away from home?
Yeah. As in, if somebody had offered you that to just
Right.
go somewhere else, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like somebody offered me $3,000. So now that used to be my old number. Nowadays my number is around $4,000 or $5,000.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, if you offer me $3,000, do you want to come this weekend? I'd be like, no. If you want to offer me
Yeah.
5 or 6, yeah, sure.
Yeah, especially if it's not a place I want to go. I'm a very comfortable, not necessarily a homebody, but I'm a very comfortable
I'm a
person. I
homebody.
like my routine
Yeah.
of going. If like when I go to conventions and come back, my life is suddenly for a week just thrown into chaos because I'm not hitting the gym on time. The fridge isn't stocked for me to cook. I have to get back into painting, and so it throws a wrench. And so, like for instance, this week I didn't make any money. So if you had asked me, definitely wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Well,
much
that's
like
the
Bruce
thing. You
though,
don't always know ahead of time, right? Like you
yeah,
hope that you've estimated how things will go, but I mean, last December I had a magic event that I went to, and those are usually like easy money, like come in, you're not even paying for a table, like you're a guest there, like cool, like there's nothing not to like about that, but it turns out every once in a while, even those things can be
Yeah, it
bad,
really
and
does.
really think I made $600 for the weekend. So was it worth it to have to fly all the way to Texas? Not really, but I couldn't have known that ahead of time.
Well, Here's the interesting part: is that the money from the show isn't necessarily everything the benefit of the show.
Sure, sure. There are other
So
things too,
there's always
but
intangibles. There's people you meet. Like I've met. So one of my big things is when I go to shows, I always like to meet new people and stuff like that. And I look at products that everybody has. I'm like, that's interesting. I wonder if I can have that something like that similar to myself.
Yeah.
So like I said, a show is about marketing, not just the sale. So sometimes, even though the sales aren't near as good as I'd like it to be, I'm like, oh, but you know what? I made a really good friend this show, and we're talking about things, and I'm learning some stuff from them. Got it. That offsets the money.
Yeah, that definitely happened to me this last show. I had time to walk around. I got some great advice on setups from because I've been looking for travel setups constantly, and met a lot of artists that I think we're doing. Oh, oh, we're boring you.
no, no, I'm just tired.
I get it.
This is
I
this
get
is
it.
party life Bruce leads.
We, we start talking about shows that didn't make money, and Bruce is out. He's
No,
No, no,
he is
more
minus
more a
one.
matter of trying to fit everything into my schedule. I'm flying out to China on Thursday. We're gonna go see the in-laws. I haven't been back there for years and years, like, pre-pandemic and all that. So
I thought it
busy
was last year
times.
you went back.
No, no. So my wife and kid were there
Oh, that's
for
what it
three
was. Okay.
months last year,
Yes. Yeah, I
or
remember reading
sorry,
that. Yep.
2 years ago, I guess technically now. They were there for about maybe a month around
Yeah.
this
It
time
was 2 years
last
ago.
year. But I hadn't gone with them for those particular trips, so this one I'm like, yeah, I gotta say yes this time. So I'm taking some traditional paintings in my luggage with me to work while I'm there.
Are they gonna be oils?
No, acrylics.
Oh, acrylic. Oh, nice. You don't have to worry about the
Yeah, yeah,
not drying.
yeah. I'm gonna be there for a full month, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get some work done. Can't bring my computer whole setup with me, or at least I really don't want to do that. Um, so just gonna bring some traditional and enjoy it. And
Mm.
Oh,
I
fun.
I really hope that the every student I taught in college was using Procreate, and I really hope that Apple picks up on that and makes some sort of large format iPad that can compete with a large Wacom that you could travel around with.
they
Because
should. But I
Actually,
also, to be honest, like a lot of people are all about the Procreate these days. Um, I don't know. I find that the results feel kind of appropriate for a sketch, but not what I'm looking for from a final piece. And I'm not sure exactly why all that is. It's actually been a while since I've used Procreate, but I was an early adopter of it. Like, it's got a lot of good stuff to it. But I don't know. I wouldn't want to be like working on a final image for my clients on that.
no, I get that. I get that, Bruce, because yeah, is even though I Procreate and I use on my iPad once in a while, it's like, but I have a because we used to do a dog agility shows, so I got myself one of those Cintiq Pro Studios
Hmm.
to
mm,
and I love that thing. I mean, they have problems with it after like 2 or 3 years, but I don't care. Buy a new one. But using Photoshop on the thing with with the little key things and like the hotkeys for my pen stuff like that, all of my client work always just gets done with that. But the other thing about it is, it works for me is that I just use a chalk brush. And now Procreate can come up with the Photoshop chalk brush,
Hmm.
has the right feel to it. Then I may end up using Procreate. But just using that chalk brush in Photoshop is just exactly like my painting style. So that works great for me. And I can carry
Probably
it on
the
the road.
lack of like mixer brushes that
I know.
bothers me about it because I love those things.
That's because we're old, Bruce. We're used to our habits.
Sure,
Echo
sure, and that is a big part of it all. But
Yep.
Echo
I-
Chernik has one of those. I saw her use one of those. What are they called? Cintiq Studio Pros,
Yeah,
or
that's what I
mhm.
have. Yeah.
they seem interesting, but they're heavy, right?
All right. Yes and no. They're heavier than an iPad, but I also don't find a. I'm a big guy, so I don't find a uh an air conditioner heavy either. So
Mm.
they're not you sit on my lap. The biggest problem is I do have to put a pillow down because it's really warm. It's like a laptop. It's really warm underneath
Yeah,
it if you put it on your lap directly.
I see.
They work
Okay.
great.
It's like the old when when Macintosh first came out with the metal MacBook Pros,
Yep.
they would get so hot they used to burn my legs. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot. I don't remember whether it's Apple or one of the other products, but yeah, I remember they had the laptop because I've been around for a long time when laptops first started coming out. And you would put it on a desk, and they would heat up the whole desk that you were on.
Mm. Yeah. Now, one thing I always appreciated about you is that you're always on the hustle. It seems like you do this art and business thing really, really well.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm
It's
always pointing people to you.
well, the thing about it
True.
is that so when I'm talking to people at shows, and this is the important part I try to tell people, I throw away a lot of paintings. I still paint them. I count as doing the painting, but I throw away a lot of paintings because for me, it's never about the finished painting. It's always about the process. And like, so for night right now, my gallery of nightmares, coming up with a creepy story, the YouTube. I love doing the YouTube videos. I love writing the stories. I love doing all the other stuff. And I was talking to somebody who shows, and they're like, "You love your brand." I go, "I do. I love it." But I do it if I wasn't selling it? Absolutely. It's just fun. And that's the part I think a lot of people miss. They
Hmm.
want to do, they're looking at, well, wait, you toss out the painting and you're done. Yeah, but you could have sold it. And a couple people go, I would have bought it. I was like, yeah, but I don't want to sell it. I don't like
Yeah.
it. And if you learn to focus on the process for it, what you're going to find, and you're open about different things, you realize that the process is actually going to lead in lots of different directions. So this is people have their hobby. And my hobby happens to be making a lot of money for me, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah. I see it over and over again with people that are starting out conventions, and I'm sure people saw it at me. It's like turns out that thing that is going to make you a lot of money is the thing that's fun and easy for you in the first place. Because I think, especially me, when I first started coming up in illustration, I had the mindset like, okay, to be professional, these paintings have to be extremely detailed, tons of people, a narrative. I mean, I've got to be hitting all cylinders. Turns out it was never true. The paintings that I one day we were sitting around and there's an empty spot in our living room, and I said I really want to fill that, but I don't want to fill it with any of my commission work because it's all wizards and dragons, right? I don't want that. So I painted something that would go in the living room that I would like to look at every single day, and it also became my bestseller. And I was like, oh, it's been this easy all along.
Well, and that's actually the important part. It's kind of like Bruce, you do landscapes and stuff like that. I started out as a gallery landscape painter years and years ago in the early 2000s. It's
Right.
kind of like I would just do landscapes, trees, mountains, all the other stuff. And I remember one day talking to my wife, and I'm like, oh yeah, we moved to North Carolina from Vermont, and I couldn't get into the galleries down here, and I'm like, didn't know what to do. I was talking about my wife. I was thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't be a painter or stuff like that. It was fun, but it was a hobby, but it wasn't all that great. And I'm like, yeah, but I love landscapes. My wife's like, no, you don't. Yeah, yeah, I love it. No, you like really weird paintings. You like monsters. If you can't get in the galleries, just paint monsters. And I started painting monsters, but I tried to paint monsters like everybody else does, detail, edges, and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, this isn't very good. I thought it was okay, but I knew I had a long way to go. And what I remember, I did a thing for freelancing, eval from Lauren Panapinto and Mark Sheff. And Mark's like, I really don't like your fancy work. I was like, okay, fine. But I really like your outdoor plein air work. I'm like, oh, what if I took my outdoor plein air style and applied it to monsters? And then from
That's
there,
where
like,
it
and I like
gelled.
reading stories. From there, everything it just felt right.
Hmm.
And then my business totally took off. I mean, I was going from maybe 5 or 10,000 a year to selling in the galleries, where I would get
Right.
like half that money to like the 150, 170 a year. Now doing all the other stuff because it came down to this is what I like doing. Because my wife's like, every time you did 2 or 3 paintings to the gallery, you would do one for yourself. just paint for yourself. And it really has changed everything. So now I don't even focus on, I haven't done that many paintings lately because I've been big into writing. So guess what? My stories are coming out. So I don't worry about what the product is. I worry about just what am I doing that makes me have fun and can I sell whatever I'm doing?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like work at all, right?
Yeah.
It's the
Except when
wild
it
thing.
doesn't work.
Yeah, well, yeah. So yeah, when I'm doing my commission, you can't love every painting that you do as a commission. It's just not the way it works.
Yeah.
That's why I
Sometimes,
don't do freelance anymore. It's just too
yeah,
stressful and all the other stuff. Like, you know what? I really don't want to do this anymore.
especially when you do, let's say, a beloved fantasy series you've loved your whole life, and then everyone lambasts your art on the internet. Uh,
Kind of, yeah, it kind of takes it out, doesn't it?
they're like, this isn't how this character's supposed to look. It's like, oh no.
Or you may, or you get hired to make someone else's favorite fantasy series that you secretly do not enjoy at all.
I asked Donato once. I'm sure I've said this on the show. Um, what do you do when you get a commission and you don't want to do the painting? And he says, "Oh, I read the book and find the one scene that I can turn into a Lord of the Rings painting later." So when he
That's
renounces
a
it,
really good idea.
yeah. So, uh, Doug's sort of a treasure trove of information. Is there anything I'm not asking him that people would like to hear, Bruce? Because you've known Dougie so much longer than I have.
I mean, really anything about the business of it, because Dougie thinks his way through that stuff to a degree that a lot of people don't.
Okay. So, well, let's do a couple things. Okay. The biggest, like, remember how I had all those 3 rules and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So, all right. One of the other things, there's several things I really focused a lot on the business. First thing off is it's really important in shows, but this is on your online personality too. This is Facebook, social media, and stuff like that. You got to remember, people are buying you as much as they are buying your product. If they like you, they're more inclined to buy the product or invest in your painting. Even if it's not the most perfect thing, it doesn't matter. They're buying a part of you. So when I'm going to a show, like just like when I used to do outdoor painting, when I go to a show, they would pretty much say, I gave them, talk to them and stuff like that, as if they're a friend and stuff. Because when they go home, they're going to remember the discussion. They're going to hang the paper on the wall. They're going to remember talking to you. They're going to see you next year going, hey, we talked about last year. They go, that's right. I don't remember, do you remember me? I'm like, I'm sorry. I remember like 20, I see like 20,000.
Right. You
Not
see
a problem.
thousands of people each
Yeah,
year.
but they want to come back and they'll find you. That's where the mailing list, that's where all the other stuff comes in. You've got to let them. Nowadays on YouTube, they're really doing that where they say you're really focusing on authenticity. They people buying stuff on YouTube, all the other stuff, they want to know you, which is why I started doing the videos on YouTube and stuff like that because they get to know me better. And marketing, as most people don't like it, marketing unfortunately is going towards video. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to go towards TikTok. It's going to YouTube. It's going to Reels. It's going to all the stuff. It's been
Right.
like that for a long time. It's going to go even more because it's easier to watch a quick video than actually read something, blogs, or any of the other stuff.
It hurts my reader's soul. It really does.
I'm having such a hard time getting into any form of video. I had I always forget the guy's name, but he was telling me how he does it. He does it really well, and he sets a timer for every 5 minutes, and then he'll turn his camera on for 30 seconds, and then repeat constantly while he's painting. And I was like, that's a really good way to get video without having to edit, a 2 hour, 3 hour long thing. It also sounds miserable to me. Like,
Well, one of the beauties I found, because I also because I have the day job and everything like that, I make really, really high use of my time. So this is the one thing that lately, all right, so I've rebranded all myself to be the Gallery of Nightmare Stories, right? It's hard to write stories. However, I took the variation of the transcript and the YouTube thing. So what I did was I created a new pad, create my story, got it, have my story in my head, record a YouTube video to tell the story to the people. Now I can put that on YouTube. Then I can take the then I take my MP3, take the transcript, put the transcript into Word. Now I've got the basis of my short story that I just wrote. Now I just type up my short story. Now that short story can go in my books, Kindle RPG, and Kindle and all the other platforms, which then creates people who watch my YouTube channel, hopefully for monetization, which then hopefully gets more people to invest in my stories, which then goes to the other platform. But it's a nice, efficient way of creating everything and making use of all the different technologies at that time.
It's a really good idea. I'm going to steal it.
Go for it.
I've
I've
been
been telling people it really is, because people have used this for years. It's the transcriber thing you keep onto your hand, that you're recording while you drive. The only difference is that now, plus I've got that MP3 done, right? Guess what? It could go on Audible and for a podcast.
Efficient.
You take a month's worth of stories, put it together. You've got 40 minutes, drop that onto a podcast or something like that. Now you've got because my business is all about getting my product into as many different avenues that is not just art. And here's the reason why is because of AI. Well, it's been like this a long time, but the problem with AI is, I know everybody wants it to go away, and it's not.
Mhm.
Which means then that if you only create art, you're in a danger of getting ignored by everybody else. Because people do like AI. I've got some collectors who have my paintings. They have canvas prints of AI art on their walls. People love it. And if you don't come up with a way of expanding your art past just the image, it's going to be a quick death.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a farm job lined up.
You've got
I
a
retire
farm
in
right
6
out
years.
back.
I retire in 6 years, and I cannot wait till I retire.
Yeah. I always think of I know that AI has the potential to be a bigger death blow, right? But I
Yep.
always think of my old mentor Todd Lockwood, and he got started laying typeface, back whenever before word processors, right? Doing laying typeface by hand and doing like painting droplets on beer cans, and then that evolved into uh, actual book cover work, which evolved into digital took over the market very quickly, right? Uh, and so he sort of had to shift to that, and he thought that he was sort of gone, but he managed to adapt, and I think a lot of people managed to adapt. And I don't
Well,
know.
that's you do
Along
have
those
to
lines,
adapt.
I was going to say Dougie's a great example of leaning into the human part of the equation, right? This is the other reason to do
Yes.
shows and things like that. Remind people that you're a human, lean into all of the aspects of what it means to be human, right? Like interact with the people, leave some memory of yourself with them,
And that's the
and
important
that
part, leading
connects
the
to your
memory.
work.
If you lead the memory of their encounter with you, and it's a positive memory, even when you do your postings on social media, Sarah Dollinger is amazing at doing that type of stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But you leave that, guess what? They're going to go and look you out, and they're going to be your biggest fans.
Hmm.
And that's why they say mailing lists are very important, because that's the way you maintain your fans.
Hmm.
And they'll help you get through the situation. But you do have to adapt. Yep. People are like, well, no, this isn't going to go away. It's like, unfortunately, it's not going to go away, and you're going to have to learn to adapt.
Yeah. I do think it's going to shrink the market, but it'll become more intimate. I always use the furniture example. All furniture used to be nice wood, handmade, real materials. It's now very rare. And
Yep.
what is still out there that's handmade and made out of real material is uh, selling for a premium. I think people crave a unique element, a
They
handmade
do.
element.
That's
And
why it's really hard for digital art. For traditional artists, it works great, because
mhm,
there'll
Yeah,
always be a market for traditional artists no matter what happens.
yes,
So
I
for
agree.
me, who do everything traditional, and especially oil paintings, which sell. I mean, acrylic, people like acrylic stuff like that. But if you look in terms of product sales, and you look in terms of sales based on media, oils is still seen as the
sure,
professional.
sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's just from history. But so if you do traditional stuff, you always have a leg up. Now,
Mhm.
what I do is I do a digital painting to help me with my oils. I still do digital. What I do is I do a digital painting first, then transfer
Right.
my drawing from a
You
digital painting and use
plan
it
it
for a
out.
thumbnail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that works
Same here.
beautifully. But whenever every 10 or 15 paintings before were good. Now I would say about 6 to 8 of every my 10 paintings are good.
Huh.
But having using digital as a tool, and they go, well, you could use the same thing in AI. It's like, it's not the same thing.
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
letting the computer plan your work for you is a very different thing from using the tools on the computer to help you paint a little faster or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Somebody came up with an analogy one time. They were like talking about the keyboard. It's like, well, you hit the keyboard, you hit those like little buttons to compose the songs, but nobody would ever think that's the same as a pianist.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Um, well, do we have anything else? Do you have anything else, Bruce? Otherwise, I'm gonna.
Let's see. Do we have all the other stuff? I think we pretty much covered everything. Yeah, the one oh, this is the one thing I do want to cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
One minor thing. Okay. Because this is actually important we covered some of this before. This is everything is a balance. I do 20 shows a year. I have my day job, which means I
Wow.
work upstairs in my office, right? But my wife and I have been married over 20 years. One of the biggest things I do is she's the absolute priority, which means I need to still do my paintings. I still need to do my drawings and all my other stuff. I set up all my stuff in my living room so that even if we're not talking, I'm still in her presence
Your
doing the
presence, yeah.
things when she does a thing. So like I'll be like, okay, but it also it creates a reminder for me. Oh, you know what? You really need to get a painting done. It's sitting in the living room. Just do it. So I have a nice little clean corner. But that more than anything else, she takes care of all the other chores while I'm gone. But when I get home, we have some non-negotiable. Like the first night I come home, I always spend with her. No work, nothing, anything like that. But all the other times, it's absolutely critical to just make time that you're in front or at least in the presence of the other person so that they know that you're there for them, not
Mhm.
just for doing the work. And
Right.
for people who do a lot of conventions, that's wicked important.
Makes
Thankfully,
sense.
my wife comes to my conventions, and I hope she doesn't stop. But
My wife
you're
will start
still
coming
right
to the
though,
convention.
because we always part of the reason we do that is to make time,
Yeah.
after the show or to go through it together. Because even though I didn't have a good show this weekend, we still went, on
You were
what
there together and you got to enjoy
go enjoy a
Rollins a
meal
little bit and
and yeah,
And the dinners and stuff, I love having my wife come. She doesn't come to all my shows, but I love having my wife come to the shows because she's really good at finding cheap things to do.
Mhm.
So what we do is Friday, I'm done with setup at noon. We're in Tampa. We're gonna go see the manatees. It's free. All right, let's go see the manatees. So she's like my tour guide. She looks at the town, figures out what to do,
Mhm.
and Friday afternoon till night, we'll figure out something to do. She does a show with Saturday, and then Saturday night we do dinner and we leave. But yes, that is the absolute critical thing more than anything else.
yeah. Remember why you're making the
Yeah, while
money
you're
in the
doing
Right.
first place. Yeah,
Make room in your life for life, not just art.
it, pretty much.
I
I
used
Just
have also
art,
to
got
not just business.
I used to take everything out of back when I was first trying to make a living at this. I took everything out of my apartment. No PlayStation, no TV. It was all art all the time. I was unfollowing people on Facebook that didn't post about art. Uh, and so whenever I was living with another person again, it was very difficult for me to get back into those things because I still had that mindset. Oh, I've got to go be painting right now. It was like a
Yeah.
pull in my head. And so I'm actually going to take your advice because now I don't do that anymore and it takes away from the work. So I'm going to take your
yeah,
advice and find a way to work in the living room.
Oh,
yeah.
I've
So
I
my
I've
just
got
living room.
I've got my setup out there. Now,
really,
granted, it's partly because the ceiling is a little higher, so the what's the term for it? The painting thing. It actually
Palette,
fits. Yeah,
easel,
no, the
easel.
The easel, yeah, the easel actually fits. I can get it fully upright and everything. But I put it out there after kind of testing out the idea with painting artist proofs,
Mm-hmm.
because I would tape those down to like some board and then put that on my lap and paint while watching Netflix with the family or whatever.
That's what I do.
And I really like the vibe of
Yep.
being out there and doing it around them. So I've been kind of taking more and more of my painting stuff out of the studio and over to where they are.
Yeah. So what I do is on mine, and I have the easel in my corner. I have a shelf, a bookshelf with glass doors. The bookshelf has all of my stuff inside of it. On top of the bookshelf is a glass palette, and I can just paint this a little corner. And then I've got my Cintiq Pro. When I'm doing neat drawing, I just sit on the couch and I do it, or my sketchbooks and stuff like that. But you can get a ton of work done. I can get everything I need to do done. But you don't have to talk to the person. It's just being in the presence. So when they say something or they're laughing about something on TV, you can share that moment or something like that. And for me, that is absolutely critical. Because I do know some people who have had relationship issues because of they come home, they go down to their basement, work, or they go in the room, work, and then they're all
Right.
back on the road again. It's like you're not gonna be able to sustain something like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I heard that from Donato once that he doesn't work on weekends anymore. And then I was talking to Sean Speakman, who's over Grimwood Press, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Donato was a little late with this work, but he said it was because he was spending time on a trip with his family, and how can you be mad about that?" So, even
Fair enough.
even one of the biggest names in the industry is taking time
Yeah.
for his family.
Good role model.
Yep.
Well, on that note, I think I need to head out, but it's lovely chatting with you, Dougie.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks.
awesome, guys! Thank you very,
Where
very much for having me on.
where can people find you before we?
Shadowmyths.com. SHADOWMYTHS.com.
Right.
And if you want, you can find me on YouTube, my web, all over the place. Shadow Myths is like all over.
Yeah, it's a great umbrella one. All right. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to smash the subscribe and like button below because I'm trying to do that now.
Trying to do that thing.
We actually got a lot of subscribers after the last one, so I'm hoping we continue to grow. I think we get good information out into the minds of
We'd like to
artists.
think so.
Yeah. Anyway, we will catch you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.